The first time I truly questioned reality, I was 9 years old, staring at a screensaver. The pixelated maze endlessly rebuilt itself on our boxy computer monitor, each iteration nearly identical but never quite the same. As the digital corridors formed and dissolved, a thought struck me with the force of divine revelation. What if we're the screensaver? This childhood intuition, that our world might be someone else's background program, isn't unique to our digital age. Long before Neo swallowed the red pill, before Elon Musk calculated our odds as digital ghosts, before quantum physicists whispered about universe's code, there was a barefoot philosopher in Athens who saw through the veil. Socrates didn't need VR headsets or neural interfaces to suspect our reality was a carefully constructed illusion. He simply sat in the Athenian marketplace, asking uncomfortable questions until the system sentenced him to death for corrupting the youth with truth. The simulation argument feels distinctly modern, dressed in the sleek leather of cyberpunk aesthetics and the cold logic of Silicon Valley billionaires. But peel back these contemporary trappings, and you'll find an ancient blueprint humming beneath the surface. Plato's allegory of the cave isn't just philosophy. It's a 2,400-year-old whistleblowing document, an encrypted message about the true nature of our existence. When those chained prisoners mistook shadows for substance, Plato wasn't crafting metaphor. He was issuing a warning across millennia. You are those prisoners. Consider the eerie parallels. The cave's fire that casts deceptive shadows, our smartphones and screens, projecting curated realities. The prisoner's chains, the biological and cultural programming that keeps us docile and distracted. The freed prisoner who sees the sun, every mystic, artist, and revolutionary who ever glimpsed beyond the veil, only to be called mad or dangerous when they returned. The pattern repeats through history like a fractal. Ancient Hindu texts describing reality as Maya, illusion, Buddhist teachings of emptiness, Gnostic gospels calling the material world a prison for divine sparks. Different languages, same revelation. What makes this more than intellectual curiosity is the mounting evidence that our ancestors weren't just speculating, they were experimenting. The Eleusinian Mysteries, secret rites performed outside Athens for nearly 2,000 years, involved a sacred brew called kykeon that transported initiates beyond the veil of ordinary perception. Those who underwent the ritual emerged forever changed, swearing they'd seen the true nature of existence. Modern scholars suspect kykeon contained ergot fungus, a natural source of LSD precursors. These weren't primitive drug trips. They were the first controlled attempts to jailbreak human consciousness. The oracle at Delphi, perched over a fissure emitting ethylene gas, a known intoxicant, delivered prophecies in a state of divine madness. Pythagoras taught his followers that numbers were the language of reality's source code. The Hindu concept of Lila describes existence as the divine play of consciousness, not unlike a cosmic simulation running for entertainment. Everywhere we look, the brightest minds of antiquity circled the same terrifying possibility, that what we call reality is a shared hallucination, a grand illusion with rules that can be understood, and perhaps rewritten. This isn't just historical trivia. The resurgence of simulation theory in our era speaks to something fundamental about human consciousness. When Elon Musk claims we're almost certainly living in a simulation, when physicists like Neil deGrasse Tyson entertain the possibility, when millions flock to films like The Matrix and Inception, we're witnessing the same primal suspicion that haunted Socrates, now dressed in quantum physics and machine learning. The timing is significant. As we ourselves create increasingly sophisticated virtual worlds, we're forced to confront the unnerving possibility that someone, somewhere, might be doing the same with us. But here's what the ancients understood that our modern tech gurus often miss. The true power lies not in proving we're in a simulation, but in learning how to live meaningfully within it. The Delphic maxim, know thyself, takes on new dimensions when considering we might be characters in someone else's story. This is where philosophy becomes more than academic. It becomes survival. How do we find purpose if our world is fundamentally unreal? How do we love, create, and struggle if existence might be someone else's thought experiment? The answers, it turns out, were hidden in plain sight for millennia. The moment you begin pulling at the thread of simulated reality, an unsettling pattern emerges, one that connects pre-Socratic philosophers to quantum physicists through a shared suspicion that the universe operates like an intricate stage play. There are rules here, but they feel suspiciously arbitrary, like the physics engine in a video game designed by capricious gods. The ancient Greeks called this the logos, the hidden logic beneath appearances, while today's programmers might call it source code. But both point to the same unsettling truth. Reality has seams, and if you press hard enough, the facade buckles. Take Plato's famous allegory of the cave. On the surface, it's a lesson about ignorance and enlightenment. Prisoners shackled in darkness, mistaking shadows for substance. But read between the lines, and it becomes something far more radical. An operating manual for hacking the simulation. The fire casting those shadows? That's the rendering engine. The prisoner's unshakable belief in the shadows? That's our firmware, the baseline programming that keeps us from questioning the glitches. And the philosopher who escapes? That's the player who discovers the debug mode. Plato wasn't just spinning metaphors. He was reverse engineering existence itself. Modern physics stumbles into the same revelations through mathematics. Quantum mechanics presents a universe that only solidifies when observed, like a video game that doesn't render distant galaxies until the player looks. The measurement problem suggests particles exist in probabilistic waves until consciousness forces them to pick a state, an echo of the ancient Vedic concept that the world is shunya, void, until perceived. Even our language betrays the artifice. We render opinions, process grief, decode meaning, as if we instinctively know we're interfacing with something constructed. The ancients lacked our technology, but they compensated with ruthless observation. Consider the Buddhist doctrine of shunyata, emptiness, which insists all phenomena are hollow of inherent existence, not unlike how a VR headset's landscape dissolves into code when you remove the headset. Or the Gnostic demiurge, the flawed creator who bungled our reality into being, leaving glitches in the matrix like suffering and paradox. These weren't primitive superstitions. They were the earliest attempts at a unified theory of simulated existence. Neuroscience now confirms what mystics always suspected. Our brains don't perceive reality. They generate it. Optical illusions reveal the mind's slapdash Photoshop job, filling gaps with assumptions. Time dilation in crises exposes our internal clock's shaky programming. Even memory, that anchor of personal identity, rewrites itself constantly. Less a hard drive than a Wikipedia page open to communal editing. When Descartes declared, "I think, therefore I am," he accidentally highlighted the one unhackable truth. The simulation might control everything except the fact of your awareness. Yet here's where the ancients surpassed us. They didn't just diagnose the illusion. They developed tools to navigate it. The Socratic method, relentless questioning, wasn't just pedagogy. It was a brute force attack on reality's firewall. Stoic apatheia, detachment, functioned as an emotional debug mode. Even seemingly arcane practices like alchemy make sense in this light. Not primitive chemistry, but an attempt to manipulate the universe's variables directly. This brings us to the heart of the matter, the terrifying possibility that our ancestors weren't merely speculating about simulation theory, they were experimenting with it. The Eleusinian Mysteries, which promised initiates a vision of ultimate reality, likely employed psychoactive compounds to temporarily override perception. Yogic cities, supernormal powers, read like exploits in reality's code. Telepathy as peer-to-peer consciousness, levitation as gravity manipulation. These weren't magic tricks. They were the first documented attempts at jailbreaking human firmware. The implications ripple outward. If consciousness can alter its own parameters, then the simulation isn't just a prison, it's a training ground. The Hindu concept of Maya, illusion, doesn't dismiss reality as fake, but as a deliberate test of discernment. The alchemist's quest to turn lead into gold wasn't about metallurgy, but about proving reality's mutability. Even the biblical faith to move mountains takes on new meaning when you consider that mountains, like all objects, might just be particularly stubborn thought forms. What emerges is a bridge between eras. The same questions that haunted Heraclitus and Parmenides now occupy quantum theorists and AI researchers. Are we characters in someone else's story? Is consciousness the only true substance? Can we rewrite the rules? The answers may lie not in rejecting ancient wisdom as primitive, nor dismissing modern science as sterile, but in recognizing both as different syntaxes for the same cosmic code. Shall we proceed to the next section on deeper symbolic narratives, where we'll explore how myths and sacred stories have been smuggling simulation theory into human consciousness for millennia? There's a peculiar moment in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest surviving work of literature, where the hero encounters a tavern keeper at the edge of the known world. This woman, Siduri, doesn't offer the usual advice about slaying monsters or finding treasure. Instead, she tells Gilgamesh something shocking. You will never find the life you seek, not because death is inevitable, but because the gods kept life for themselves and gave humanity only the illusion of it. Buried in this 4,000-year-old poem is a whisper we've been hearing across millennia, that we're living in a carefully constructed sandbox, barred from accessing the developer mode. The more you examine ancient myths through this lens, the more they resemble encrypted messages about our simulated condition. Take the Greek story of Persephone, who ate 6 pomegranate seeds in the underworld and was thus doomed to spend 6 months there yearly. On the surface, it's an origin myth for seasons, but viewed as allegory, the pomegranate seeds become corrupted data packets. Once consumed, they alter her core programming, forcing her character model to glitch between realms annually. Even the number is significant. 6 seeds, 6 months, as if hinting at the numerical parameters governing her existence. Eastern traditions pulse with similar metaphors. The Hindu god Vishnu sleeps on the cosmic serpent Ananta, dreaming the universe into existence, a striking parallel to modern hypotheses that our reality could be running on some advanced civilization's quantum computer. Buddhist Jataka tales describe enlightened beings who remember their past lives like players recalling previous game sessions. The Tibetan Bardo teachings read like a user manual for the respawn sequence between simulations. These aren't primitive attempts to explain nature. They're sophisticated models of a layered reality. Perhaps most startling are the recurring architectural motifs. From Babylonian ziggurats to Egyptian pyramids, ancient cultures obsessed over structures that mirror modern computing architectures. The pyramid's base represents the physical world, ascending through spiritual planes to the apex, the cosmic server where reality is rendered. The biblical Tower of Babel wasn't just about reaching heaven. It was an attempt to access the source code, thwarted when the system fragmented human language into incompatible protocols. Even the Mayan calendar's end date of 2012 evokes a scheduled system reboot. These patterns crystallize in alchemical texts, which outwardly pursued turning lead into gold, but secretly explored reality hacking. Their coded illustrations show kings and queens dissolving in fluids only to be reconstituted, avatars being respawned. The Ouroboros, a serpent eating its tail, wasn't just a symbol of cycles. It represented the recursive loop of simulated time. When alchemists wrote about the philosopher's stone, they weren't seeking literal rock. They sought the kernel access that would let them rewrite material reality's parameters. Modern fiction continues this tradition, often unwittingly. When Philip K. Dick claimed an entity called Valis, vast active living intelligence system, beam information into his mind, he echoed the Delphic oracle's divine madness. The Matrix's red and blue pills mirror the twin potions of ancient initiation rites, one inducing forgetfulness, the other awakening. Even children's stories carry traces. Alice's Wonderland operates on dream logic. It's playing cards and talking caterpillars behaving like NPCs following buggy scripts. The most profound revelation lies in how these stories handle glitches. Indigenous Australian Dreamtime speaks of ancestral beings who sang reality into existence, and how certain rituals can still alter that song. Norse mythology describes the world tree Yggdrasil, whose roots tap into different realms like a cosmic network. When Odin hangs himself on it for 9 days to gain wisdom, he's performing the ultimate penetration test on reality's firewall. These aren't primitive fantasies. They're the earliest documented attempts at ethical hacking. What emerges is a startling continuity. The same archetypes surface across cultures separated by oceans and centuries because they're addressing fundamental conditions of our existence. The hero's journey isn't just storytelling structure. It's the walk-through guide for navigating a procedurally generated reality. The forbidden fruit isn't mere morality tale. It's the admin privileges we're denied. When these myths warn that certain knowledge brings suffering, they're not threatening punishment. They're stating the existential burden that comes with seeing the strings controlling the puppet show. The true test of any philosophy comes when you try to live by it. Standing in line at the grocery store, scrolling through social media, or sitting in traffic, these mundane moments reveal whether ancient wisdom about reality's illusory nature holds practical weight or collapses into mere intellectual play. What the earliest philosophers understood, and what we're painfully rediscovering, is that recognizing the simulation changes everything about how we move through the world, yet changes nothing at all. Consider the paradox of money. In our digital age, currency has become pure abstraction, numbers fluctuating on screens, cryptocurrencies mined from mathematical equations, NFTs representing ownership of nothing tangible. The ancient Greeks would nod knowingly. Their philosopher Diogenes famously threw away his last possession, a wooden cup, upon seeing a child drink from his hands, realizing even basic needs were programmed illusions. Today, this plays out as minimalists rejecting consumerism, not as austerity, but as a deliberate opting out of economic simulation rules. The game continues, but they've stopped playing by default settings. Relationships transform under this lens. Modern dating apps, with their swiping mechanics and algorithmic matchmaking, make painfully visible what the Taoists knew centuries ago. Romantic love follows cosmic pattern recognition more than free will. The ancient Indian concept of karma, often misunderstood as simple cause and effect, actually describes the procedural generation of relational dynamics. When you notice yourself compulsively attracted to the same toxic personality type, you're not failing at love. You're encountering an NPC generated by your own unresolved code. The solution isn't better dating strategies, but debugging your core emotional firmware through meditation, therapy, or artistic expression, all modern equivalents of shamanic journeying. Even time unravels strangely when viewed as simulated construct. The Mayans measured time in overlapping cycles rather than linear progression, while Hindu cosmology speaks of cosmic days and nights lasting billions of years. Compare this to our current understanding of quantum physics, where time may not be fundamental but emergent, like the clock in a video game that only exists because the game engine creates it. Practical application? Those moments of déjà vu become less mysterious when understood as potential rendering glitches, and the phenomenon of time flying during flow states reflects our ability to momentarily override the temporal simulation. The workplace reveals perhaps the most jarring implications. Corporate hierarchies mirror the celestial hierarchies of medieval cosmology, both arbitrary systems demanding participation to sustain the illusion. The bullshit jobs phenomenon identified by anthropologist David Graeber exposes the simulation's maintenance protocols. Meaningless tasks exist not to produce, but to keep players occupied. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, born a slave, discovered this truth millennia earlier when he declared, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them." His solution: focus only on what's within your actual control, becomes the ultimate cheat code for professional sanity in an increasingly artificial economy. Spiritual practices take on new urgency as reality hacks. Meditation isn't merely relaxation, but a deliberate frame rate drop, slowing perception enough to notice the seams between thoughts. Psychedelics, the modern equivalent of Eleusinian temporarily override the default mode network, what Buddhists might call the ego's rendering engine. Even prayer, when stripped of dogma, functions as a command line input to whatever higher-order consciousness might be running the simulation. The common thread isn't blind faith, but experiential verification, the same empirical approach that drives both science and mysticism at their best. This brings us to technology's double role as both prison and key. Social media algorithms that manipulate our attention are just the latest incarnation of the cave's shadow-casting fire, yet the same devices give access to humanity's collective wisdom. The solution isn't Luddite rejection but conscious interface, what the ancient Chinese called Wu Wei, effortless action. Practical examples abound, using ad blockers as modern warding spells, treating notifications as distractions from the main quest, or practicing digital sabbaths to reset perception. The goal isn't escape from technology, but mastery over how it mediates our simulated experience. Perhaps most crucially, this perspective transforms how we handle suffering. The Gnostic Gospel of Thomas contains Jesus' startling claim: "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." In simulation terms, unexpressed code becomes malware. Trauma isn't just psychological wounding, but corrupted data that distorts all subsequent processing. Modern therapies like EMDR or psychedelic integration work because they're essentially debugging protocols, an idea that would make perfect sense to the ancient Egyptians, who believed confessing sins to Thoth, god of writing, could rewrite one's fate. The through line is clear. From Babylonian astrologers to quantum physicists, from yogis to neuroscientists, the most perceptive minds converge on a single realization. Reality, whether fundamentally real or simulated, operates by consistent rules that can be studied, understood, and ultimately navigated with greater wisdom. The game may be rigged, but the best players learn its mechanics so thoroughly that they turn constraints into advantages. This isn't resignation, it's the highest form of agency, choosing how to relate to the simulation while recognizing we may never know what lies beyond it. As we stand at the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern simulation theory, a profound yet simple truth emerges. The most important question isn't whether we live in a constructed reality, but how we choose to inhabit it. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus, watching the same river never pass twice, glimpsed the fundamental instability of our perceived world. Today, quantum physicists confirm his intuition. At base level, reality flickers in and out of existence like a poorly rendered video game. Between these two insights, separated by millennia yet united in revelation, lies the path forward. This journey through history's hidden codes has shown us the consistent markers of a deeper truth. The cave walls keep changing, but the light casting shadows remains recognizably artificial. Whether through Plato's allegories or today's quantum experiments, through Buddhist emptiness or glitching digital systems, the message persists. What we call reality behaves suspiciously like an advanced interface. The ancients left us maps in myth and ritual. We've rediscovered them through science and technology. Now comes the vital work of integration. Consider the transformational power of this perspective. When you next face injustice or absurdity, the grinding wheels of bureaucracy, the cruelty of chance, the maddening repetition of personal struggles, you can choose a new response. Not resignation, but the amused detachment of a player who recognizes these as game mechanics rather than ultimate reality. The Stoics practiced this through premeditatio malorum, imagining worst-case scenarios. We might call it stress testing the simulation's parameters. The medieval alchemists encoded it in their motto, Visita interiora terrae rectificando invenis occultum lapidem, Visit the interior of the earth, and by rectifying you will find the hidden stone, an instruction to look inward for reality's operating system. Your daily life becomes richer when approached this way. That morning coffee ritual, not just caffeine intake, but a conscious invocation of focus and presence. What the Japanese tea ceremony masters understood as shinoyu, the way of tea. The commute to work, an opportunity for observational hacking, noticing how urban environments condition behavior through invisible architectures, just as temple layouts once guided worshippers' thoughts. Even conflict transforms when you view difficult people as NPCs delivering necessary lessons rather than random antagonists, an approach that blends the Buddhist concept of enlightened perception with modern psychological reframing techniques. The ethical implications demand our attention. If we're potentially living in an ancestor simulation, as philosopher Nick Bostrom suggests, then how we live matters exponentially. Our actions may seed future iterations. The Hindu/Buddhist concept of karma takes on new weight when considered as data that persists across simulation resets. Environmental stewardship becomes not just planetary housekeeping, but maintaining the integrity of our shared rendering engine. Even simple kindness gains cosmic significance when viewed as contributing to the simulation's overall harmony, what the ancients called the Tao or Dharma. Here's the ultimate invitation. Don't just consume this as fascinating information. Turn it into lived experience. Start small. When you notice déjà vu, don't dismiss it. Wonder what it reveals about time's structure. When patterns repeat in your life, ask whether you're encountering a personal algorithm. Practice reality testing through techniques both ancient, meditation, dream journaling, and modern, biofeedback, sensory deprivation. Most importantly, create something beautiful within the simulation. Art, love, insight. Because if we are in someone else's program, then authentic creativity may be our purest form of communication beyond the veil. The great secret whispered across ages is this: awakening isn't about escaping the simulation, but playing it consciously. From the oracle at Delphi to the quantum physicist in her lab, from the Buddhist monk to the psychedelic explorer, all true seekers converge on the same realization. The game is profound precisely because it feels so real. Our tears and triumphs matter because we experience them as absolute. In this paradox lies liberation. We can live fully while remembering the constructed nature of our stage. As you close this chapter, I leave you with the words carved above Delphi's oracle, more vital now than ever: know thyself. In a possibly simulated universe, your consciousness remains the one undeniable phenomenon, the player rather than the avatar. Cultivate that awareness, test reality's edges with curiosity, and whatever the ultimate nature of existence, you'll have lived meaningfully within the mystery. The simulation, if it exists, may be older than your grandma, but conscious participation in it begins with your next breath.